How do I figure out what's next in my career? How do I align my work with what truly matters to me? And the biggest question of all, can I really design a career that I love? Hey, my name is Jen Smith, and I believe career success doesn't have to come at the expense of living a radiantly happy and healthy lifestyle. As a former HR leader and recruiter turned career coach, I've seen how traditional paths can leave people burned out or boxed in. And I know there's a better way, one that invites you to let go of outdated rules and outside expectations, one that evolves and supports meaningful growth over time. Whether you're feeling stuck, craving more clarity, or ready to expand within your current role and beyond, this show is for you. So grab your coffee or your kombucha, pull up a seat, and get ready to explore practical, modern strategies for building a meaningful, heart-based career. Because you deserve a long, radiantly happy, and healthy career. This is the Flourish Careers Podcast. Hello, and welcome back to the Flourish Careers Podcast. I'm Jen Smith, your host, and today's conversation is a really meaningful one for me personally. Long before Todd Henry was a guest on this show, his work changed the direction of my life. Years ago, during a season where I was rethinking all the things, work, purpose, how I wanted to spend my time and energy, one of Todd's books became the final push I needed to step into what eventually became Flourish Careers. And in today's conversation, I shared that story with him for the first time. Sitting down with Todd all these years later felt especially full circle. And after this conversation, I think you'll understand exactly why his work has resonated with me and so many others for so long. For nearly 20 years, Todd Henry has equipped leaders and creative pros to become the most valuable person in any room. He's the author of 7 books, including The Accidental Creative, Die Empty, and Herding Tigers, which have been translated into more than a dozen languages. He speaks internationally on topics including creativity, productivity, passion for work, and generating brilliant ideas. Todd's podcast, Daily Creative, has been downloaded more than 20 million times since 2005. Over the years, Todd has developed a comprehensive framework called the Brilliance Engine that empowers leaders and creative pros to produce brilliant work in healthy teams that make a meaningful difference in the world. Through his keynotes and workshops, he shares practical strategies to help people and teams to be brave, focused, and brilliant every day. And in today's conversation, we talk about uncertainty, creativity, career evolutions, how success comes in layers, and the seasons of life and work that shape us most deeply. So with that, let's get to it. Todd, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Jen, it's so good to be here. Thank you so much for the kind invitation.
So you recently celebrated a huge milestone, 20 years of podcasting. And I listened to your 20 years and 20 minutes episode, which we'll link for listeners. And one of the things that really stood out to me was how much your career path unfolded through what seemed like serendipitous moments. So there was unexpected conversations and kind of these moments that ended up shaping the next thing. Of course, this was alongside a tremendous amount of hard work. But when you look back now, how do you make sense of those moments? And did you recognize how meaningful they were along the way, or only in hindsight?
I think it's important that you have a vision for where you want to go, but you also have to hold loosely to that vision because it's impossible to know where you're actually going to end up. I do believe that success comes in layers, and that's something I've always taught my clients, that every moment that you think is going to be the moment is just another data point. It's just another experience that's going to layer onto another experience and another experience. But I think we have as a culture, we've become so obsessed with the moment that everything breaks. So yeah, 20 years of podcasting. When I started the podcast in 2005, I had no expectations other than just, I wanted to teach. I wanted to be able to, I was a creative director. I was struggling with trying to keep my team motivated, keeping them engaged, keeping them focused. We were under a lot of pressure to deliver great work consistently. And so I wanted to start a podcast because no one was talking about this. And Apple had just launched the iTunes podcast directory, which I thought, this is cool because actually you could put something out and people can find it for the first time. So I launched a podcast called The Accidental Creative. and put it out there and kind of forgot about it. I put out maybe 4 or 5 episodes and forgot about it. And for about a month or so, I just kind of let those episodes sit out there. And I went back looking for podcasts about a month later. And I came across one called The Accidental Creative that was one of the top podcasts on iTunes. And I thought, oh no, I stole someone else's name. Like that was what I thought. I can't believe I didn't check, but it was my podcast, right? It had been discovered. And that was, it was really cool, but it was also just the beginning of me realizing, oh, I think there's something here. It's a data point. So I started putting some more formality around it. I didn't even have a website. There was nothing. It was just, like some audio podcasts. Started putting some formality around it, built a website, started doing more podcasts, more content, more material. And then that caught the attention of a writer from US News and World Report, Kim Palmer, who was doing an article on creativity in the marketplace. And she found the podcast and had become a listener and thought, hey, this is really cool. So I ended up with that article in US News and World Report where they interviewed me for this article. And then my literary agent, who has been my agent since 2009, also represented Kim Palmer, and she saw a quote from me in that article, and she thought, well, wait a minute, or a quote from that article in one of Kim's books that she was trying to sell. This is like a year and a half later. And so she reached out to me and said, would you be interested in writing a book? And I thought, maybe, yeah. And so then we pitched to Penguin Random House and we got a book deal. And that was kind of the beginning of what now 7 books later, writing and speaking and teaching and all of that. But any one of those moments wasn't really significant in and of itself, but it was the persistence, the continuation, paying attention to the data, recognizing, wait a minute, there's something here. People are resonating with this. Maybe I need to lean more into this thing. And just continuing to sort of peel back those layers over time or add on those layers over time is what makes a career resilient, I think. And so now 20 years later, I've had a lot more data points and I've had a lot more opportunities. And it would be easy to just look at any given moment and say, oh, that was the moment when everything broke. But it really wasn't. It was really just another data point along the way, another starting line. That's the way I always talk about it. Like when you writing a book, when we got the book deal and I wrote the book and we kind of got to release day, that feels like it's the finish line. It's not. That's a starting line, right?
Yeah.
Now you're at the starting line. It feels like each of these career moments is just another starting line that you arrive at where you have the chance to run a new race. And so that's my encouragement to people is just realize you have to be obsessed with the work that you're doing and the people you're helping through that work and the outcome you're trying to achieve, and not so much on the moment or whatever feels like success to you, because that moment is fleeting and it's just a data point. It's just a new starting line for you. So you have to be obsessed with the outcome that you're trying to pursue more so than the moments.
Yes. And one thing I really appreciate about your story is that it has this very organic feel to it. So it's not overly manufactured. I work with a lot of folks that have, that vision or that end point in mind, and that's it. It's that linear path. And so I personally think careers are a lot more fun when you're staying open, staying curious, gathering those data points, and then seeing where it leads. And I think right now in our world of work, that's more important than ever because there really isn't a perfectly linear path anymore.
Absolutely not. And then also there are going to be unexpected circumstances.
Yes.
So one of the gifts was having built this body of work or built a portfolio of effort and sort of built some resilience. And then COVID hits. And my primary business is I spend time in rooms with people, teaching them and training them. And that was my primary business. And obviously that went away for 2 years, really. It was 2 full years that I couldn't really be in rooms with people. We did figure out how to do virtual teaching and training. Eventually, we figured that out. But it was a while before that sort of became a thing. So, I was really wondering, is this going to come back after COVID? Or is this basically going to completely stall every bit of momentum I had? And fortunately, again, because it's in layers, the resilience of those layers sort of came back, right, after COVID, which is great. But I know a lot of people who hadn't spent time really investing in building a body of work like that. And their career completely changed during COVID because they didn't have the same level of resilience. And that can always still happen to anybody, to me as well, right? But I do think that building layers, investing in resilience in a body of work that is about serving specific people that you're trying to help. I think that's the most important thing, because those people will always find you if you're persistent in trying to serve them.
Yes. And also the thing that's coming up for me as you're saying that is not giving up. So I think a lot of times people try and, oh, it didn't work. And so then they try something else and they try something else. And then they get really frustrated because but it really does take time to evolve and grow. And I'm 7 years in. I started during COVID, but I'm 7 years in. And now I'm just getting to the point where I'm like, okay, I've got something. Now let's take it to the next level. 7 years. And so it does. It takes time to kind of recalibrate, figure things out. And the other thing that was coming up as you were talking is you mentioned COVID, but I think a lot of even just starting podcasting in the early days of podcasting, there's so much uncertainty. And so when you think about that uncertainty, like what keeps you going through just like the not knowing, the data points, intuition, I'm guessing, just like what you're curious about, what you're excited about, all of those things?
It's all of that. I almost quit in 2007 because I had a pretty significant technical issue that came up, and I ended up basically like deleting databases because I'd created a kind of membership thing. I was trying to do everything on my own because it was, I mean, at that point, like it wasn't really even a business yet. It was just me putting value into the world. I wasn't really making money doing it. It was a sideline. I was still a creative director, and I typed a couple of wrong keys and I accidentally deleted databases worth of stuff. And I remember coming out of my home office, sitting down with my laptop on the family room floor. My wife was watching television or something, and she could see I was distraught. And she's like, what happened? And I said, I just completely destroyed 2 years of work. I just completely gutted everything. And she said, well, what are you going to do? And this was like, by the way, because I was doing all this at night and in the morning, it was probably 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. I had to be up at 6, to go to work. And she said, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And I went back into my office and I worked until like 1:30 in the morning trying to fix it. I couldn't figure it out. And somehow the next morning I woke up at 6 to get ready to go to work, and I fired up my laptop and everything had like self-healed. All the databases came back. I don't know if my host realized, oh, this was a really stupid thing that happened. This can't be for real. They restored everything, but somehow everything came back. But in that moment, I was seriously contemplating, maybe it's not worth it. At 10:30, I was like, maybe I don't even try. Maybe I just, it had a good run. It was fun.
Wow.
And it was the vision. It was the desire to help people. It was knowing that there were other people out there like me who were trying to create in an on-demand environment, who are really wrestling with these same questions, and nobody's speaking to them. And now we're in this era of an abundance of riches where there are so many people talking about these things. Back then, there was no one talking about this. And I just realized, like, I can't leave people alone in that space. We need a place where we can talk about this. So that was kind of what drove it. And I mean, there have been other instances as well, and people don't talk about this, but there are other moments where businesses go through cycles. And so I had 2 super successful books. My third book was not as successful as my first 2. And there was a moment in 2018 when I was doing a speaking event in January of 2018, and it was the last thing on the calendar. And I thought, this might be my last speaking event ever, right? Like, it was that kind of thing. And then my 4th book did super well, and I ended up speaking at like the largest event in the world and all this stuff. So all these things happened, and it's been, things have continued to grow and rebound. But we don't often, all you see are the people on stages, or you see the people talking about how successful their business is, or the people who look like they're at the top of their game with all the followers and all the everything. But every single one of them, if you ask them, have had moments in those cycles where they're like, this might be it. This could be, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is the year everything falls apart. And so I think it's important that we all be honest about that as well, that it is, like you said, a game of persistence. Success comes in layers. It's about resilience. It's not about moments. It's about resilience and layers over time.
I'm so glad you mentioned that too around the cycles. I've been playing around with this idea around careers in cycles. And I think about the cycles of nature even, and thinking about you're going to have seasons of rest. It's not always a persistent summer. Like I was in a season of summer for 10 plus years that knocked me right down. And that's just not how business or life or careers work. And I think we need to get back to nature. And so I've been playing around with that just to get people to think a little differently, that we do move in layers and circles, and it doesn't always have to be this up and to the right. And there are moments that you're going to want to quit and throw it all away, when the computer breaks or something happens. But it's that's just not nature. That's not life. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Speaking of your books, Die Empty changed my life, Todd. And I'm obsessed with the names of your book titles. So Herding Tigers, Accidental Creative, Louder Than Words. Die Empty is especially memorable, a book about living fully with death in the title. So I had to ask you about that. And I'm wondering how the title came about, or I kind of heard the story about how the title came about, but I'm curious if you got pushback or if it became a different title instead, almost.
Yeah, I got a tremendous amount of pushback. As a matter of fact, the original, you held up the bright, shiny yellow paperback version.
Yeah.
That was not the original cover, and the hardcover cover was black. I probably have a copy here somewhere. Was black with a little mind with an empty tank or whatever. We got a lot of pushback from distributors because they're it's the word die is in the title and it's a black book, right? And so that was a reaction. Actually, the publisher was like, the paperback is going to be bright, yellow, sunny, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, they really, the story is directly tied, or the title is directly tied to a story in the book. I told in The Accidental Creative, it was the last story. And then, because I thought that might be my last book I ever got to write, The Accidental Creative. And then it did really well. I'm like, oh, okay, well, Die Empty is the natural continuation. So that had to be the title because that was the story that prompted the whole thing. But yeah, the publisher wanted to explore Empty the Tank was an option, or there were a bunch of other alternatives. But in the end, to their credit, Portfolio has always been very willing to do bold things. My publisher, and they said, no, Die Empty is the title. That's going to catch people's attention. That's the one that that we're going to go with. So that, and then what's funny is Herding Tigers, that book, that was just a line in the book. And I think the original title that I gave them was something very clever, like Leading Brilliance or something like that. And And my editor, Nikki Papadopoulos, said Herding Tigers is the title of the book. And I was like, really? You think so? And then they sent back that neon, the blue and the neon yellow color scheme with the tiger on the chair. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And it went all the way to the head of Penguin USA or whatever. And she's like, that is the title. That is the cover. Just deal with it. And it was 100% the right call, right? Again, you think authors, sometimes it's wow, you have great instincts about titles, but honestly, not at all, right? It's just it's a team effort. And that's one of the things I've learned is how to lean into other people and make sure that, my intuition is not always the best. Sometimes other people have perspective and you have to be open to letting other people speak truth, reality into you. And unfortunately, often when people become more successful, they start to mistake circumstance for skill or circumstance for aptitude or intuition. And sometimes it's just, hey, you kind of got lucky at the right time with the right title and that doesn't mean that you were really good. It just means that there's a confluence of factors. So I've learned I need a lot of great people around me to help me think that stuff through.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I am obsessed with all of the titles. I think they're fantastic. And I really like how it's a catchy couple words and then the tagline describes exactly what it's about. So every time I recommend this book, I always have to make sure I share the tagline to make sure people know exactly, kind of what I'm talking about. But I'll just share a quick story. When I was contemplating leaving corporate. So I spent 15 years in corporate and really wanted to start my own business, but I was terrified. And I read this book. I was in the Finger Lakes on vacation with my husband. And I read this book and I remember coming home taking this book, because it is bright yellow and beautiful, to my parents in the kitchen in the house I grew up in. And I'm just like crying. And I'm like, I read this book and I have so much more to give and so much more to do. And they just looked at me and they're like, you know what, Jen? Go do it. Like you'll figure it out. You've always figured it out. And this was literally the last push that I needed to start my own thing. So thank you so much for that.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you for sharing that story. That means a lot. Okay, so that's like the whole thing for me. Like you just fueled me for another year, right? Like that's the whole thing. Is like it's about the outcome that you're chasing after. And if it's about like I'm going to build a business to make a lot of money and become famous or whatever, gain followers, like that is the moment you hit turmoil, the moment you hit any kind of hurdle in your life or in your work, like you're gonna fail. The word passion in its root form comes from the word that means to suffer, and it's in the original language. It doesn't mean things you like. It means what you're willing to suffer for. So when we say follow your passion, what we mean is find the thing that you're willing to suffer on behalf of, because the outcome matters more than your temporary suffering, matters more than any obstacles you're going to encounter. And once you identify that, when you begin to figure out what that is, it makes everything else, all your priorities become very clear in your life, because it's what you will bend your life around. So I do encourage people to follow their passion, but don't just go do something you like. Go do something that you're willing to suffer for. You might like doing it, but you're also willing to suffer through the hard parts, because the outcome matters more than your temporary suffering.
Yes. And there are a lot of the hard parts. And I think that's great guidance, especially for folks that are considering starting something on their own. And then you'll hear stories. Like I know with my career coaching, I'll hear a story that something helped somebody get their dream job or whatever it is. And that just keeps you going. And so same thing that we're talking about here. Now I wanted to ask you, because you said you were the creative director, you wrote the one book, now you have 7 books. So did you ever think of yourself as being an author in the early days? Was that something that just kind of happened? I know you told the story about the accidental creative, but tell me more about where that comes from.
So I've always written. That's always been sort of my creative, the way my creativity expressed itself, like in the work world. Though what's funny is I've always been obsessed with books, and I've always been obsessed with specifically with business books and with strategy books. I was in my early, I sort of jokingly say my misguided 20s now, was a singer-songwriter. And the funny thing is, like, I was the only guy on a bus, or I was the only guy like at the gig, like at dinner before the gig or whatever, that like was reading a business book, or was like putting my values on the wall of my apartment, and like my goals and my whatever. Like I've just always been wired that way. And most of my musician friends were just like, oh, this is amazing. Like we're on stage and we're, it's a party. And I'm like, no, I really need to get home, because my study time starts at, 7 tomorrow morning. I have to be up to like read and study. So it was like, I've always kind of been wired that way, and very much like not like other people around me in that scene. And so I think this is kind of how I'm wired. It's kind of what I'm wired to do. But I didn't anticipate. I mean, I thought when I got the chance to write a book, I was like, wow, okay, this is it. Like this is the pinnacle. Like to get to do a book would be the pinnacle of everything. Never imagined I would be 7 books in and working on an 8th, and that there's no way that ever crossed my mind. So it's such a gift, but also a responsibility, because I recognize how many people in the world want to be able to do this and have worked really hard. And so it's something I never take for granted, and need to treat with there's responsibility that has been handed, because it is a platform that you have to be very careful with. And should take as a privilege, as a responsibility as well.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, that's an interesting take on it, and I'm glad that you recognize that, because I think a lot of people are out there checking boxes, and getting the titles and all the things, and there's so much more to it. And it's interesting that you shared the singer-songwriter to the author, and there is definitely the creative line through everything that you do. So I just have to ask, do you still sing and write songs for fun?
I do. As a matter of fact, I have a Fender Telecaster hanging on my wall in front of me. Yeah, I still do. I still play and still write and
that's
record,
awesome.
But I don't share it. This is in the Accidental Creative, I talked about something called unnecessary creating, or back burner creating.
Right.
So music used to be my on-demand creating. And many of my friends who I wrote with and stuff, they've gone on to have these amazing songwriting careers or amazing music careers. And my creativity has gone in a different direction. But now my back burner, my unnecessary creating, the creating I do to keep my creative flame alive is often writing songs or recording and doing things like that. But I don't share them with anyone. It's just for me. It's just a way to keep my creativity stoked and to kind of keep myself going. And we all need that because at one point writing and podcasting was my like back burner creating. So I was a creative director leading teams. And then that became my job. So now like I need something else that I can do that's not my job, that's not on demand in order to keep me creatively fulfilled. And so it's kind of inverted for me. Now it's, music is the unnecessary creating that I do. But we all need that. We need something in our life to keep us creatively engaged, keep our pilot light lit, to remind us why we love to create. Because so often once we build a business around our creativity or we have a job around our creativity, it becomes all about the job because we're creative professionals.
Yes.
Creative, yay. Professional, you're a mercenary, right?
Yeah.
So you need something that can kind of keep the pilot light lit. And for me, that's what music is.
Yes, I love that guidance. And I talked with a lot of folks that have so much creativity in them. However, they're stuck in some type of role in their like day job that does not allow that to come out. That's kind of where I was. I was like, oh my God, I have so much more in me to come out. And I couldn't figure out how to do that. And so if you're not in a position to make it the job, having those outlets on the side and spending time doing that will help fuel you forward. So
it will. And the other thing I would encourage people with is that your body of work is a portfolio. And this is something I wrote about in Die Empty, that your job doesn't have to be the thing that brings you the most fulfillment and the most satisfaction in your life. And I think that's a very uniquely like 20th century Western thing.
Yeah.
To believe that 21st century, wow, I'm dating myself. But it's a very modern thing to think like my job should bring me fulfillment.
Right.
I think it's great when it does. I think that's a wonderful thing. I also think we have to consider that our life's a portfolio of passions. And so it could be that for some of us, what we do is we work a job that provides resources that give us the space or the freedom. Maybe it's the freedom of time, or maybe it's freedom of money and resources to be able to invest in other areas of our life that are truly the place where we feel like we're building the bulk of our body of work. And so there is this narrative or this pressure I think people feel to leave their corporate job and go start. And I think that's a wonderful thing. It's the path you took. It's the path I took.
Yep.
But it's not necessary. I don't want people to feel like if they don't do that, that they're somehow missing out on life, because life, first of all, people are called to different things, or different things being called out of everyone. And also, if you look at the portfolio of your life, there should be areas of your life where you're investing outside of your job. Same for me. Like my job, I get to craft what my work is, which is amazing. But my work is not the sum total of my body of work. It's not the sum total of the contribution I'm making. It's one part of it, but there are all kinds of things outside of that I'm investing in, where I'm serving, I'm volunteering, I'm donating my skills, donating my efforts to other organizations that I care about. Obviously I have a family. I have 3 adult kids now. I have a great group of friends. We just went on a trip to Dallas to see Sting, which was amazing last weekend, which is so fun. Talk about somebody who's like in his 70s still.
Amazing, yes.
I know. I was like, oh my gosh, he's like 76 or whatever, going on 25. Like he's incredible,
Yes.
But, again, talk about building a resilient body of work, which is something he's done. Yeah, I think I don't want people to feel the pressure of there is a path for you. There's not. You get to be the architect of your life, and you just have to discern what's being called out of you. Yes. And for some people, working a steady job that provides them with resources that they can then go and invest in other areas is a perfectly lovely and wonderful path. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise.
Yes, 100%. And I even talk about portfolio as a career too. Like you don't have to just do one thing. There can be multiple things. It's so easy in this day to have multiple things happening at once, so sometimes you need that cash cow to pay the bills, but then you can have these other things, and then your friends and your family and your gifts and everything else that you do. And so that's really what living fully means. As we wrap up, Todd, one thing I've always appreciated about your work, even though you talk about creativity and the systems. Alongside that, there's always a conversation about being healthy, alive, awake, energized in your life. And so as we come to a close, what's feeling really energizing for you right now other than the Sting concert last weekend? Maybe something you're building or exploring or learning that you want to share with us.
Yeah, I've come to a realization recently that I haven't really shared publicly. This is the first time, but a realization about my own body of work, my own through line, that it really is about rehumanization. And all of the things I feel called to in my business life are about rehumanizing creativity. So the accidental creative is like, oh, you're being treated like a cog in a machine. Here's how to build practices in your life to create some space and distance from the machine that wants to just extract creativity from you, right? Die Empty was about, hey, let's rehumanize your legacy here. Let's think about what is the uniquely human thing you're contributing to the world. Louder Than Words, about your voice. It's about what is your unique human voice and how is that finding expression in the world. Herding Tigers is about lead your team like humans. The Motivation Code was about what is your unique motivation as a human. The Brave Habit is all about like confronting moments of uncertainty and approaching those in a human way where you're afraid, but you do the right thing even under pressure, right? So for me, what's exciting me, especially as we're moving into this age of AI and automation and all of these things, and this is the new area I'm exploring right now, is what is human desire, creativity, and taste in an era where machines are making decisions for us? And how do we reclaim the humanity of the creative process in an age where it's easy to offload that to a device, offload that to a machine? So that's what's exciting me is I'm seeing a lot of conversation happening in that space. But I feel like that is very confluent with my calling, which is to rehumanize. I mean, and the same thing in my volunteer work. Most of my volunteer work is about rehumanizing people who are being dehumanized. That's kind of where I'm spending a lot of time, my wife and I. Now that we have 3 adult kids, we have more time to spend, on volunteer efforts. And that's what we've been doing. So that, for me, that's the exciting thing is I've just come to that realization that, oh my gosh, I have been rehumanizing my entire career.
Yes.
That's what I've been doing. I just didn't realize it until very recently.
Well, it's perfect timing because we're all going to need that conversation more than ever, along with, I'm sure you'll have some very practical frameworks and different ways to think about that for all of us in this wild world of technology that we are moving through. So that feels especially inspiring, and we'll definitely keep an eye out to see what comes of it. So Todd, what an honor. Thank you so much for sharing so generously today. Your bravery and focus and brilliance have literally changed the course of my life, and I am so grateful.
That's really kind of you to say, and thank you. And I would say, listen, we all do that for one another, and we all need one another. That's the thing. Like each one of us needs everyone else to do exactly what you did, exactly what I'm doing, which is to step into the space, share what you're seeing, share what you know, encourage one another from your perspective. When any of us don't do that, we all miss out. And so we need all of us to be willing to step into that space, to be brave, to have integrity under pressure, to do the right thing, even when it's the uncomfortable thing. And ultimately, at the end of our lives, hopefully to go to our grave empty of all of that great work, to go to our grave with minimal regrets, but full of satisfaction for a life well lived. That's what we want to do. So
that's right. That is the ultimate call to action. So thank you for sharing that, listeners. I know you're going to want to connect with Todd. So buy his books, listen to his podcast, dive deeper into all of his work. We'll make sure that we have everything in the show notes, and certainly you will be better for it. And as always, you can find the notes and resources over on the blog at flourish.careers/blog. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll talk to you next time.